The moment Kwame bit into the jollof rice, his mouth began to burn. Not the good kind of burn from pepper and spices that every West African knows and loves, but something else entirely. Something wrong. His tongue felt like it was growing bigger, pushing against his teeth. His throat started to close up. Across the table, his sister Ama dropped her fork with a loud clang. Her eyes had turned completely white, rolled back into her head, and she was making a strange humming sound that didn't come from her mouth but seemed to vibrate from somewhere deep inside her chest. The other customers in the restaurant started screaming. Kwame tried to stand up, tried to call for help, but when he opened his mouth, instead of words, hundreds of tiny black butterflies poured out and filled the air around him. But let me take you back to the beginning, to show you how two ordinary siblings ended up in the most dangerous restaurant in all of Lagos. Kwame was 14 years old and thought he knew everything about the city. He had lived in the Surale neighborhood his whole life, walking the same streets, buying akara from the same woman every morning, playing football in the same dusty field with his friends after school. His little sister Ama was 11 and followed him everywhere, which annoyed him most days but secretly made him feel important and protective. Their mother, Mama Ikin, worked as a nurse at the big hospital near the mainland. She worked long hours, sometimes not coming home until the moon was high in the sky. Their father had died 3 years ago, so Mama Ikin did everything she could to take care of them. She cooked their meals every Sunday and left them in containers in the refrigerator with instructions written on sticky notes. Monday, warm up the egusi soup. Tuesday, there is rice and stew. Wednesday, finish the plantains before they go bad. But this particular Wednesday in July, when Kwame got home from school, he found the refrigerator almost empty. Mama Ikin had been called in for extra shifts at the hospital because many people were sick with a strange illness that made them sleep for days without waking up. She hadn't had time to cook. There was only half a loaf of bread, some butter that smelled a bit off, and 3 eggs. Ama came into the kitchen, her school uniform dusty from playing during break time. "I'm hungry," she announced, peering into the empty refrigerator. "Very, very hungry." Kwame felt that familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was the man of the house when Mama wasn't home. He had some money, about 2,000 naira that he'd been saving from helping Mr. Okonkwo at his shop on weekends. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to buy them dinner. "Let's go out to eat," Kwame said, trying to sound confident and grown up. "I'll take you to get proper food." Oma's eyes lit up. They almost never ate at restaurants. It was too expensive, and Mama Ikin always said home food was better anyway. "Really? Where?" "There's that new place on Edinaron Ogonsanya Street," Kwame said. "The one with the blue and yellow sign. I've walked past it many times. It always smells good." They changed out of their school uniforms and walked through the busy streets of Lagos. Evening was coming, and the air was thick and warm. Hawkers called out their wares, selling everything from phone chargers to roasted plantains. Downfall buses rumbled past, packed with people heading home from work. The city hummed with life and noise and movement. The restaurant was called Mama Put's Modern Kitchen, which Kwame thought was a clever name. It tried to look like the traditional Mama Put street food stalls but was inside a proper building with tables and chairs and even air conditioning that made a loud rattling sound. The blue and yellow sign flickered slightly, and through the windows, Kwame could see several people sitting at tables, eating and talking. A woman stood at the entrance. She was very tall, taller than any woman Kwame had ever seen, and she wore a bright purple wrapper with gold threading that seemed to shimmer even though the light was dim. Her face was beautiful but strange. Her eyes were too large, and they didn't blink as often as normal eyes should. "Welcome, welcome," the woman said, her voice smooth like honey. "Come in, young ones. Come and eat. We have the best food in all of Lagos. The best food in all of Nigeria. The best food in all of Africa. Something about the way she said it made Kwame's skin prickle, but Ama was already walking inside, drawn by the delicious smells wafting from the kitchen. Kwame followed, telling himself he was being silly. It was just a restaurant. Inside, the place was cleaner than he expected. The floor was swept, the tables were wiped down, and soft high-life music played from a speaker somewhere. There were about 6 other customers scattered around, all eating quietly. Too quietly, Kwame noticed. No one was talking. They just ate, their spoons moving from plate to mouth, like machines. Sit, the tall woman said, gesturing to a table near the back. I am Mama Abeni, the owner. What would you like to eat? We have everything. Jollof rice, fried rice, pounded yam, egusi soup, pepper soup, suyo, everything. Kwame ordered jollof rice with chicken for both of them. It was Oma's favorite, and he wanted to make her happy. The price was surprisingly cheap, much cheaper than he'd expected. Only 500 naira for both plates. That left him with plenty of money remaining. Mama Abeni smiled, showing very white teeth. Too white. Excellent choice. The jollof rice here is special. Very special. It will change your life. She disappeared into the kitchen, and Kwame and Ama waited. The other customers continued eating in their strange silence. One man had been eating the same plate of food the entire time Kwame had been watching, but the plate never seemed to get empty. A woman in a green dress stared at her soup without moving, her spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. This place is weird, Ama whispered, leaning close to Kwame. Shoo, Kwame said, but he agreed. Everything felt wrong, like when you wake up from a dream and can't quite remember what scared you, but the fear still clings to your skin. Mama Abeni returned carrying 2 plates piled high with bright red jollof rice, chicken, plantains, and salad. The food looked perfect, too perfect, like a photograph from a magazine. The rice gleamed under the flickering fluorescent light. Eat, Mama Abeni urged, standing over their table. Don't let it get cold. Food is best when it's fresh and hot. Kwame picked up his fork. The smell was incredible, making his mouth water. Ama was already scooping up rice, bringing it to her lips. They both took their first bites at the same time. And that's when everything went terribly, horribly wrong. The rice tasted amazing at first. Better than any jollof rice Kwame had ever eaten, better even than Mama Ikin's special party jollof that she made for celebrations. The flavors exploded on his tongue, rich and spicy and somehow sweet all at once. He took another bite, then another. Beside him, Ama was eating just as fast, shoveling the rice into her mouth like she hadn't eaten in days. Slow down, Kwame said, but his own fork was already moving toward his mouth again, almost like it had a mind of its own. That's when he noticed something odd. The more he ate, the hungrier he felt. His stomach felt empty, hollow, like a deep well that could never be filled. He tried to stop eating, tried to put his fork down, but his hand wouldn't obey him. It just kept moving, scooping up rice, bringing it to his mouth, over and over again. Kwame, Ama said, and her voice sounded strange, distant. Kwame, I can't stop eating. He looked at her and saw that her eyes were watering, not from crying but from eating too fast. She was chewing and swallowing, but she looked scared. Mama Abeni appeared beside their table again, still smiling that too wide smile. Good. You like the food? Everyone likes the food. That's why they keep coming back. That's why they never leave. Kwame's heart started pounding. He looked around at the other customers and really saw them for the first time. The man who had been eating when they arrived was still eating, but now Kwame could see that his hands were shaking. The woman in the green dress had tears running down her face, but her spoon kept moving to her mouth automatically. These people weren't customers enjoying a meal. They were trapped. With every bit of strength he had, Kwame forced his hand to drop the fork. It clattered onto the table, and the sound seemed very loud in the quiet restaurant. His hand immediately tried to reach for the fork again, but he grabbed it with his other hand, holding it down. "Ama," he said through gritted teeth. "Stop eating. Put the fork down now." But Ama couldn't stop. Her eyes were wide with fear, but her hands kept moving, kept scooping rice into her mouth. "I'm trying," she said between bites. "I can't. Kwame, help me." Kwame stood up, his legs wobbling beneath him. He felt weak, dizzy, like something was draining out of him with every moment he stayed in this place. He reached across the table and grabbed Ama's hands, forcing them down, making her drop her fork. "How rude," Mama Abeni said, and her voice was no longer smooth like honey. It was sharp now, dangerous. "You haven't finished your food. Customers must always finish their food. That is the rule of Mama Put's modern kitchen." "We are leaving," Kwame said, pulling Ama up from her chair. "We are leaving right now." "No one leaves until they finish eating," Mama Abeni said, and suddenly she seemed even taller than before, her shadow stretching across the floor like a dark stain. "No one has ever left. Look around you. These people have been here for days, some for weeks. They eat, and the food never runs out, and they never get full, and slowly, I take what I need from them." "What do you take?" Kwame asked, even though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Mama Abeni's smile grew wider, impossibly wide, her mouth stretching across her face. "Their essence, their spirit, their life force. Whatever you want to call it. I am very old, you see. Very, very old. And I must feed on the young and the living to stay in this world. The food is just the trap. Once you take a bite, you cannot stop until I have taken everything from you." Kwame's mind raced. He thought about all the folktales Mama Ikin had told him when he was younger, stories about spirits and monsters and creatures that pretended to be human. She had always ended those stories with a warning: never eat food from strangers. Never accept gifts from people you don't know. The spirit world is always hungry, and it's always looking for a way in. He had thought those were just stories to scare children into being careful. But now, standing in this restaurant with his sister's life in danger, he realized the stories were warnings. Real warnings about real dangers. Ama started to cry. "Kwame, I'm so hungry. I need to eat. Please let me eat." "No," Kwame said firmly, holding both her hands tight. "That's not real hunger. It's a spell. It's not real." The other customers had stopped eating now and were all staring at them. Their eyes were empty, hollowed out, like someone had scooped away everything that made them human and left only shells behind. They stood up from their tables, moving slowly, surrounding Kwame and Ama. "You see," Mama Abeni said, "even if you try to leave, my other customers won't let you. They've been here so long, they're mine now. They do what I tell them. And I'm telling them to make sure you sit back down and finish every last grain of rice on your plates." The empty-eyed people moved closer, reaching out with thin, trembling hands. Kwame backed up, pulling Ama with him, but there was nowhere to go. They were surrounded on all sides. The door seemed very far away, and Mama Abeni stood between them and freedom, her purple wrapper shimmering, her two large eyes fixed on them like a cat watching mice. That's when Kwame remembered something else from Mama Ikin's stories. Spirits had rules. They had weaknesses. They couldn't just take whatever they wanted. There were always conditions, always loopholes, always ways to fight back if you were smart and brave enough. "We didn't finish our food," Kwame said loudly, his voice shaking but determined. "We didn't finish it, so the agreement is broken. You said customers must finish their food. But we didn't. So we're not really your customers, are we?" Mama Abeni's smile faltered for just a moment. "You ate some of it. That's enough. No, Kwame said, thinking fast, remembering every story, every warning, every lesson. In every story, in every deal with spirits, completion matters. We have to finish everything, or the deal isn't sealed. We took bites, yes, but we didn't finish. That means we can still live. That means you can't keep us here. For a long moment, Mama Abeni just stared at him. The other customers had stopped moving, frozen like statues. The whole restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then Mama Abeni threw back her head and laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Clever boy. Clever, clever boy. Yes, you're right. The old rules still apply, even here in this modern city with its cars and phones and electricity. You didn't finish. You can go. Relief flooded through Kwame. He started to move toward the door, pulling Oma with him. But, Mama Abini said, and that one word stopped him cold, your sister did finish. Look at her plate. Kwame looked. Oma's plate was completely empty, scraped clean, not a single grain of rice remaining. His own plate still had food on it, the food he'd stopped eating. But Oma, who had eaten faster, who hadn't been able to stop herself in time, had finished everything. No, Kwame whispered. Yes, Mama Abini said, and her voice was triumphant. The girl is mine now. She finished her meal. The agreement is sealed. She belongs to Mama Put's modern kitchen forever. Oma looked at Kwame with terrified eyes as her body began to move on its own, walking slowly back toward the table, back toward the empty plate, back toward Mama Abeni's reaching hands. Kwame didn't think. He just moved. He lunged forward and grabbed Oma around the waist, pulling her back with all his strength. She fought against him, not because she wanted to, but because something else was controlling her body, making her try to return to the table. Her arms flailed, her legs kicked, but Kwame held on tight. Let her go, he shouted at Mama Abeni. She's just a child. Take me instead. Mama Abeni tilted her head, considering. A noble offer. But it doesn't work that way. She ate the food. She finished the meal. The magic doesn't care about substitutions or sacrifices. It only cares about completion and consumption. Kwame's mind raced. There had to be a way out. There was always a way out in the stories. The hero always found a loophole, a trick, a moment of cleverness that saved the day. But this wasn't a story. This was real life, and his sister was being pulled toward a fate worse than death, and he didn't know what to do. Then he remembered something his grandmother had told him years ago, before she passed away. She had visited from their village in Enugu State, and one night, sitting on the veranda under the stars, she had told him about the old ways. The spirits of the earth follow ancient laws, she had said, her voice soft and papery with age. They can trick you, trap you, bind you with agreements and bargains. But they must also honor challenges. If you challenge a spirit properly, in the old way, they must accept or lose their power over you. I challenge you. Kwame shouted suddenly, the words coming out before he fully knew what he was saying. I challenge you to a contest, Mama Abeni, if that's even your real name. If you're truly a spirit of the old ways, you must accept a proper challenge. The restaurant went completely silent. Even the air conditioning stopped its rattling. Mama Abeni's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. You know the old ways, she said slowly. How does a city boy know the old ways? My grandmother taught me, Kwame said, standing taller, trying to look braver than he felt. She was from the village, from the real old places where people still remember. And she told me that spirits must honor challenges. So I challenge you. If I win, you let my sister go. You let everyone in this restaurant go. You close this place and never trap anyone again. Mama Abeni was quiet for a long time. Then she began to laugh, that same glass breaking sound. And if you lose? Then I stay here willingly, Kwame said. I'll eat your food every day and let you drain my essence, and I won't fight or resist. Kwame, no. Ama cried out, her voice breaking through whatever control had been placed on her for just a moment. Interesting, Mama Abeni said, circling around them like a predator. Very interesting. It's been many years since anyone challenged me properly. I accept. But I choose the contest. That's fair, Kwame said, though his heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his chest. Mama Abeni smiled. The contest is this: I will tell you 3 riddles. Ancient riddles from the time before time, from when the world was young and spirits walked openly among humans. If you answer all 3 correctly, you win. If you fail even one, you lose, and you become mine forever. Do you accept these terms? Kwame swallowed hard. He wasn't good at riddles. He was average at school, better at football than at thinking games. But he had no choice. I accept. Then let us begin, Mama Abeni said. She raised her hand, and the restaurant transformed around them. The walls fell away, and suddenly they were standing in a vast empty space that seemed to exist nowhere and everywhere at once. The other customers, the tables, the chairs, everything disappeared except for Kwame, Ama, and Mama Abeni, who now looked less human than before. Her skin had taken on a greenish tint, and her eyes glowed with a pale light. First riddle, she said, her voice echoing in the emptiness. I am always hungry, I must always be fed. The finger I touch will soon turn red. What am I? Kwame thought hard. Something always hungry, always feeding, that turns things red when touched. His mind went through everything he knew, every story, every lesson from school, every piece of wisdom Mama Ikin or his grandmother had shared. Fire, he said finally. The answer is fire. Mama Abeni's expression didn't change, but she nodded. Correct. Fire is always hungry for fuel, and it turns skin red when it burns. You have answered the first riddle. But the next 2 will be harder. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Second riddle, I have cities but no houses, forest but no trees, water but no fish. What am I? This one was harder. Kwame closed his eyes, trying to picture what she described. Cities without houses, forests without trees, water without fish. How could something have those things but not have the things that made them real? Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time felt strange in this empty place. Ama stood beside him, holding his hand tight, believing in him. He couldn't let her down. Then it came to him. A map, he said, opening his eyes. The answer is a map. It shows cities and forests and water, but they are just drawings. They are not real. For the first time, Mama Abeni looked impressed. Correct again. You are smarter than you look, city boy. But now comes the final riddle, the hardest one, the one that has trapped everyone else who dared to challenge me. Answer this, and you win everything. Fail, and you lose everything. She leaned closer, and Kwame could smell something ancient and wrong coming from her, like old earth and rotten leaves. Final riddle, what is it that the rich need, the poor have, and if you eat it, you will die? Kwame's mind went blank. This didn't make sense. The rich need something that the poor already have. That seemed backward. Rich people had everything, and poor people had almost nothing. And how could eating something that poor people have kill you? He thought about food, but that didn't fit. He thought about money, but that didn't work either. He thought about love and family and happiness, but none of those seemed right. Time was passing. He could feel it, like sand slipping through his fingers. Mama Abeni watched him with those glowing eyes, waiting, knowing he was struggling. Think, Kwame, Oma whispered beside him. You can do this. I know you can. What did poor people have that rich people needed? What could kill you if you ate it? Then, like a flash of lightning, the answer came to him. It was so simple, so obvious, that he almost laughed. Nothing, he said clearly. The answer is nothing. Rich people need nothing because they have everything. Poor people have nothing. And if you eat nothing, if you have no food at all, you will starve and die. The silence that followed was absolute. Mama Abeni stared at him, her face frozen, her glowing eyes wide. Then, slowly, she began to shrink. Her tall form collapsed in on itself, getting smaller and smaller, and the greenish tint to her skin faded. She looked almost human again, but very old, very tired. You have won, she said, and her voice was small now, defeated. You answered all 3 riddles correctly. The challenge is complete. I must honor my word. The empty space around them dissolved like smoke, and suddenly they were back in the restaurant. But it looked different now. The walls were cracked and peeling, the floor was dirty, and cobwebs hung in the corners. It looked abandoned, like it had been empty for years. The other customers were still there, but they were waking up, as if from a deep sleep. They looked around in confusion, touching their faces, their arms, checking to make sure they were real. The man who had been eating the endless plate of food stood up, shaky but alive. The woman in the green dress began to cry, but these were tears of relief. You are all free, Mama Abeni said, and now she just looked like a tired old woman in a faded purple wrapper. The boy has broken my power. The restaurant is closed. Go home. Return to your families. Try to forget this place. The people didn't need to be told twice. They stumbled toward the door, supporting each other, and filed out into the Lagos evening. Soon, only Kwame, Ama, and Mama Abeni remained. Why did you do it? Kwame asked. Why did you trap all those people? Mama Abeni sat down heavily on one of the chairs. I am old, she said. So old that I have forgotten my true name. I came from a time when spirits and humans lived closer together, when the boundaries between worlds were thin. But the world changed. It grew loud and fast and full of iron and electricity, things that weaken old spirits like me. To survive, I had to feed on life force, on essence. So I created this restaurant, this trap. I told myself it was necessary, that it was just survival. But perhaps I was wrong. You were wrong, Oma said firmly, finding her voice again. You hurt people. You scared them. That's not okay, no matter how old you are or how hungry you feel. Mama Abeni looked at Oma for a long moment, then nodded. You are right, child. Out of the mouths of the young comes wisdom. She turned to Kwame. You have won fairly. I will keep my word. But more than that, I will leave this city. I will return to the wild places, to the forest and rivers where old spirits belong. Perhaps it is time to fade away entirely. Perhaps my time in this world is done. She stood up, and as she did, she seemed to become less solid, more like a shadow or a dream. Go home, children. And remember this, not everything that looks good is good. Not every meal offered is safe to eat. The old dangers still exist, even in this modern world with its phones and cars and tall buildings. They just wear new faces. Then she was gone, dissolving into the evening air like mist. Kwame and Oma stood in the empty, decaying restaurant for a moment, just breathing, just being alive and free. Then Kwame took his sister's hand, and they walked out into the busy streets of Lagos. The city hummed around them, loud and alive. Downfall buses rumbled past. Hawkers called out their wares. Somewhere, someone was playing loud Afrobeats music from a speaker. Everything was normal, wonderfully, beautifully normal. They walked home in silence, both too shaken to talk about what had happened. When they finally reached their small house in Suralere, Mama Ikin was just arriving home from the hospital, her nurse's uniform wrinkled and her face tired. "There you are," she said, relief in her voice. "I was worried. Why weren't you home? Where did you go?" Kwame and Ama looked at each other. How could they explain what had happened? Who would believe them? "We went to get food," Kwame said finally. "But the place wasn't good, so we came home." Mama Ikin frowned. "You should have waited for me. I would have cooked something. You know I don't like you eating at restaurants. You never know what might be in the food or who is preparing it." "We know that now," Mama, Ama said quietly. "We really know that now." That night, as Kwame lay in bed, unable to sleep, he thought about everything that had happened. He thought about the riddles, about Mama Abeni, about how close they had come to being trapped forever in that horrible place. He thought about all the people who hadn't been as lucky, who had eaten at the wrong restaurant at the wrong time and paid terrible prices. The next day at school, Kwame couldn't focus on his lessons. His mind kept wandering back to the restaurant, to the empty-eyed people, to the feeling of Omo's hand in his as they fought to escape. During lunch break, his best friend Chidi asked him what was wrong. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Chidi said, biting into his meat pie. "Something like that," Kwame muttered. He wanted to tell Chidi everything, wanted to share the burden of what he knew, but he kept quiet. Who would believe such a story? They would think he had gone crazy or was making up tales for attention. But then something happened that changed everything. During their mathematics lesson, a new student was brought into the classroom by the principal. She was a girl about their age, with neat cornrows and a shy smile. The principal introduced her as Zainab, said she was from Kano and had just moved to Lagos with her family. "Zainab will be joining your class," the principal said. "Please make her feel welcome." Zainab took an empty seat near the back of the classroom, and the lesson continued. But during break time, Kwame noticed something strange. Zainab wasn't eating lunch with the other students. She sat alone under a tree in the schoolyard, watching everyone else with curious, careful eyes. Kwame approached her, Oma trailing behind him. "Hi," he said. "I'm Kwame. This is my sister Oma. Welcome to our school." Zainab looked up at him, and Kwame saw something in her eyes that made him pause. Recognition. Understanding. Like she could see something in him that others couldn't. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's nice to meet you both. Why aren't you eating lunch?" Ama asked with a child's directness. Zainab hesitated, then said, "I only eat food prepared by my mother or grandmother. It's a family rule. We don't eat food from strangers." Something about the way she said it made Kwame's skin prickle with the same feeling he'd had at the restaurant. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why is that your family rule?" Zainab looked around to make sure no one else was listening, then leaned closer. "Because my family knows things. Old things. Dangerous things. We know that the world is not always what it seems. We know that spirits and monsters still exist, hiding in plain sight, wearing human faces. And we know that one of the easiest ways they trap people is through food." Kwame's heart started beating faster. "You know about the spirits." "I know many things," Zainab said. "And I can tell that you do too now. I can see it in your eyes. You've encountered something, haven't you? Something that shouldn't exist but does." Before Kwame could answer, the school bell rang, calling them back to class. But as they walked back to the building, Zainab touched his arm lightly. "Meet me after school," she whispered. "At the big mango tree near the gate. There are things you need to know. Your encounter with that restaurant wasn't random. Something is happening in Lagos. Something bad. And I think you and your sister are going to be part of stopping it, whether you want to be or not." She hurried off to class, leaving Kwame standing frozen in the schoolyard, his mind reeling. What did she mean? What was happening in Lagos? And why would he and Oma be involved in stopping it? The rest of the school day crawled by. Kwame couldn't concentrate on anything. His teachers called on him several times, but he barely heard them. His mind was too full of questions, too full of memories of glowing eyes and empty restaurants and riddles that held life and death in their answers. When school finally ended, Kwame and Ama rushed to the mango tree near the gate. Zainab was already there, waiting for them. She had a small leather bag slung over her shoulder, old and worn, covered in symbols that Kwame didn't recognize. "Good," she said when she saw them. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." Sometimes people who encounter the spirit world want to forget it ever happened, want to pretend everything is normal. "We want answers," Kwame said firmly. "You said something is happening in Lagos. What did you mean?" Zainab opened her leather bag and pulled out a folded newspaper. It was from that morning, the Lagos Daily Times. She unfolded it and pointed to a small article on page 3. "Mysterious disappearances continue in Lagos," the headline read. Over 50 people reported missing in the past 2 months. Police baffled by lack of evidence or leads. Kwame felt cold despite the warm afternoon air. "You think these disappearances are related to things like the restaurant?" "I know they are," Zainab said. "My grandmother is a Mamalawo, a priestess of the old ways. She can sense when spiritual activity increases in an area. And in Lagos, over the past few months, it's been growing stronger. More and more spirits are crossing over from their world into ours. More and more traps are being set. The restaurant you escaped from was just one of many." "But why?" Ama asked, her voice small and scared. "Why now? Why here?" Zainab's face grew serious. "Because someone is opening doors that should stay closed. Someone with power and knowledge is deliberately weakening the barriers between the spirit world and the human world. And every time a door opens, more dangerous things come through." "Who would do that?" Kwame demanded. "Why would anyone want to bring spirits into our world?" "Power," Zainab said simply. "The person doing this wants to control the spirits, to use them for their own purposes. But they don't understand that spirits can't be controlled, not really. They are too old, too wild, too unpredictable. By opening these doors, this person is putting everyone in Lagos in danger." Kwame thought about Mama Abeni, about how she had said the world had changed and grown full of iron and electricity, things that weaken old spirits. If someone was bringing spirits back into the modern world deliberately, it would be chaos. "What do we do?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Zainab looked at both of them carefully, measuring them with her eyes. "My grandmother wants to meet you," she said finally. "She says that anyone who can outwit a spirit through the old ways of riddles and challenges has power of their own, even if they don't know it yet. She thinks you might be able to help us find whoever is opening these doors and stop them before more people disappear or die." "We are just kids," Oma said. "How are we supposed to stop something like this?" "I'm just a kid too," Zainab replied. "But my grandmother says that sometimes the youngest and least expected are the ones who can make the biggest difference. Adults often can't see the truth because they've stopped believing in anything beyond what they can touch and measure. But children still know how to believe. Children still have that connection to the old magic that makes all things possible." Kwame looked at Oma, and she looked back at him. They were both scared, he could see that clearly. But they were also angry. Angry at what had almost happened to them, angry at all the people who were disappearing, angry at whoever was causing all this suffering. "Okay," Kwame said. "We'll meet your grandmother. We'll help if we can. But I need to tell my mother something. I can't just disappear. She worries about us enough already." "Tell her you're coming to my house to study," Zainab suggested. "It's not really a lie. My grandmother will be teaching you things. Very important things. They agreed to meet at Zainab's house that Saturday. Zainab wrote down her address on a piece of paper, and Kwame carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. Then they said goodbye and headed home in different directions. That evening, Mama Ikin was in a better mood than usual. The hospital had been less busy, and she'd actually had time to eat lunch and rest for a few minutes. She made a simple dinner of rice and stew, and they ate together at their small kitchen table. "Mama," Kwame said carefully between bites, "there's a new girl at school. Zainab. She's very smart and good at mathematics. She offered to help me and Oma with our studies this Saturday. Can we go to her house?" Mama Ikin looked at him thoughtfully. "Where does she live?" Kwame pulled out the paper and read the address. It was in Yoba, not too far from their neighborhood, a place Mama Ikin knew. "All right," she said. "But you must be home before dark. And take your phone so I can call you if needed." "Yes, Mama," Kwame said, relieved. The next few days passed slowly. At school, Zainab would occasionally catch his eye across the classroom and nod slightly, a reminder of what was coming. Kwame found himself watching the other students more carefully now, wondering if any of them had encountered spirits too, if any of them were walking around with secrets and fears like his own. On Friday evening, something happened that made everything more urgent. Kwame was watching the news with Mama Ikin when a reporter appeared on screen, standing in front of a building in Victoria Island, one of the wealthy parts of Lagos. "Another mysterious disappearance tonight," the reporter said gravely. "The daughter of prominent businessman Chief Adeyemi has vanished without a trace. 12-year-old Funmi Adeyemi was last seen leaving her private school this afternoon. Her driver says he dropped her at home safely, but when her parents arrived an hour later, she was gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no ransom demands, nothing to indicate where she might be. This brings the total number of missing persons in Lagos to 53 in just 2 months. Police are urging citizens to be vigilant and report any suspicious activity." The camera showed a photo of Funmi Adeyemi, a girl with a bright smile and neat school uniform, looking happy and normal and completely unaware that she would soon vanish into thin air. Mama Ikin shook her head sadly. "These poor families. I can't imagine what they are going through. Nobody seems to know what's happening to all these people." But Kwame knew. Or at least, he had a much better idea than the police did. These weren't random kidnappings or accidents. These were spirits, crossing over from their world, hunting and trapping humans. And it was getting worse. He went to bed that night with a heavy feeling in his chest, knowing that tomorrow he would be stepping deeper into a world he had only just discovered, a world of danger and magic and ancient things that shouldn't exist but did. Saturday morning came bright and hot. Kwame and Ama dressed carefully, telling Mama Ikin they were going to Zainab's house to study. Mama Ikin gave them some money for transport and reminded them to be home before dark. They took a downfall bus to Yoba, following the directions Zainab had given them. The address led them to a small compound tucked away from the main road, surrounded by high walls covered in flowering vines. The gate was old but well maintained, painted bright blue with symbols carved into the wood. Kwame knocked, and Zainab opened the gate almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting right there for them. "You came," she said, smiling. "Good. My grandmother is ready to meet you. But I must warn you, she can be intense. She sees things that others can't see. She'll probably say things that sound strange or scary. Try not to be frightened." She led them through a small courtyard filled with plants and flowers, many that Kwame didn't recognize. The air smelled sweet and sharp at the same time, like medicine and perfume mixed together. They reached a door covered in more carved symbols, and Zainab knocked twice, then 3 times, then once more. "Come in," a voice called from inside, strong and clear despite sounding very old. They entered a dim room lit by candles and sunlight filtering through curtains. The walls were covered in shelves holding bottles and jars and bundles of dried herbs. In the center of the room sat an old woman on a low stool, wearing white from head to toe, her gray hair wrapped in a white cloth. Her eyes were milky with age, but when she turned them on Kwame and Ama, he felt like she could see straight through him, straight down to his soul. So, the old woman said, "These are the children who outwitted the restaurant spirit. Come closer. Let me look at you properly." Kwame and Ama stepped forward nervously. The old woman reached out and touched Kwame's forehead with one finger, then did the same to Ama. Her touch was warm and sent a tingling sensation through Kwame's whole body. "Yes," she said, nodding slowly. "You both have the gift, though you don't know it yet. The ability to see truly, to understand the old ways, to bridge the world. That is why the spirit couldn't hold you completely. That is why you could answer the riddles." "Who are you?" Kwame asked quietly. "I am Mama Olekan," the old woman said. "I am a keeper of the old knowledge, a guardian of the boundaries between worlds. And I have brought you here because Lagos is in terrible danger, and I believe you children might be the key to saving it." She gestured for them to sit on mats arranged on the floor. As they settled down, she began to speak, her voice taking on the rhythmic quality of a storyteller. "Long ago, before the white men came with their religion and their books, before even the great kingdoms of Oyo and Benin, there existed agreements between the human world and the spirit world. These agreements kept both sides safe. Spirits had their realm, and humans had theirs, and there were only certain times and certain places where the two could meet. But someone in Lagos has broken these agreements. Someone has torn holes in the fabric that separates the worlds. And now spirits are pouring through like water through a broken dam." "Who would do such a thing?" Oma asked. Mama Olekan's face grew dark. "Someone who seeks power without wisdom. Someone who thinks they can control forces they don't understand. I don't yet know their identity, but I know they are wealthy and influential. The spirits that are coming through are being directed, guided to specific targets. The people who are disappearing aren't random. They are all connected somehow." She stood up, moving to one of the shelves, and took down a large map of Lagos. She spread it on the floor, and Kwame saw that red X marks had been drawn all over it. "These are the locations where people have disappeared," Mama Olekan said. "And these?" She drew her finger in a pattern connecting some of the X marks. "These form a symbol. An old symbol of summoning and binding. Whoever is doing this is trying to create a massive spiritual gate, one that would allow something very old and very dangerous to cross into our world permanently." "What kind of something?" Zainab asked, though she looked like she already suspected the answer. Mama Olekan closed her milky eyes for a moment before speaking. "An Obiko lord. One of the ancient ones who ruled before humans learned to protect themselves. If such a being crosses over fully, it could drain the life force from millions of people. Lagos would become a city of empty shells, walking corpses with no spirit left inside them." The room fell silent. Kwame felt like he couldn't breathe. He had come here expecting answers, maybe even expecting to help somehow, but this was so much bigger and more terrible than he'd imagined. "What can we do?" he finally asked. "We are just kids. How can we stop something like this?" Mama Olekan opened her eyes and looked at him with something like fondness. "You already stopped one spirit through cleverness and knowledge of the old ways. You have the gift of seeing truly. And most importantly, you have something that adults often lose, the ability to believe in the impossible and still find courage to act." She reached into a small wooden box and pulled out 3 items, a small leather pouch, a smooth black stone, and a thin silver bracelet. "This will help protect you," she said, handing the pouch to Kwame, the stone to Oma, and the bracelet to Zainab. "The pouch contains herbs that will let you see through illusions. The stone will warn you when spirits are nearby growing warm. And the bracelet will protect you from minor spiritual attacks. They are not perfect protection, but they are better than nothing. What do you want us to do?" Kwame asked, accepting the pouch and tying it carefully to his belt. I want you to investigate, Mama Olikan said. Go to the places where people have disappeared. Look for patterns, for clues that adults might miss. Children can go places and ask questions that would seem suspicious coming from grown-ups. Find out what connects all these missing people. Find the person who is opening the gates. And when you do, come back to me, and we will figure out how to stop them. It sounded impossible. It sounded dangerous. It sounded like exactly the kind of thing Kwame should refuse and run away from. But then he thought about Funmi Adeyemi, the girl who had disappeared just last night. He thought about all the other missing people, the families who were suffering, not knowing what had happened to their loved ones. He thought about what would happen if they did nothing and this Obiko Lord crossed over completely. We'll do it, he said, and was surprised by how steady his voice sounded. We'll find out who's behind this. Ama nodded beside him, gripping her stone tightly. We'll help. Mama Olekan smiled for the first time, a warm smile that made her look less frightening. Good. You are brave children. But remember, being brave doesn't mean being foolish. If you encounter anything too dangerous, run. Come back here immediately. Do you understand? They both nodded. One more thing, Mama Olekan added, her face growing serious again. Tell no one about this except each other and Zainab. Adults will not believe you, and if word gets back to whoever is doing this, they will see you as a threat. Stay quiet, stay careful, and trust your instincts. They talked for another hour, with Mama Olekan teaching them how to recognize different types of spirits, how to protect themselves with simple prayers and gestures, how to tell when they were in danger. It was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose, but Kwame did his best to remember everything. Finally, as the afternoon shadows grew long, Mama Olekan sent them home with warnings to be careful and promises to return with any information they discovered. On the bus ride back to Sorale, Kwame, Ama, and Zainab sat close together, speaking in low voices about where to start their investigation. They decided to begin with the most recent disappearance, Funmi Adeyemi, since it would be fresh in people's minds and easier to gather information about. When they got home, Mama Ikin was already there, preparing dinner. How was studying? She asked. Very educational, Kwame said, which was completely true, just not in the way Mama Ikin thought. That night, Kwame lay in bed unable to sleep, his mind spinning with everything he'd learned. The leather pouch Mama Olekan had given him rested on his chest, and he could feel a faint warmth coming from it, like it was alive somehow. He thought about the path ahead of them, the danger they were walking into, and for a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm him. But then he remembered the riddles, remembered how he'd found the answers when it seemed impossible, remembered the feeling of triumph when Mama Abeni had admitted defeat. If he could outsmart one spirit, maybe he could help stop whatever was happening to Lagos. Maybe, just maybe, 3 children with gifts they didn't fully understand could make a difference. Outside his window, the Lagos night hummed with life and sound and light. But somewhere out there in that vast city, in the shadows between the streetlights, spirits were haunting. People were disappearing. And an ancient evil was trying to force its way into the modern world. The hunt had begun. And Kwame, Oma, and Zainab were right in the middle of it, whether they were ready or not. Sunday morning came too quickly. Kwame woke with a start, his heart pounding from a dream he couldn't quite remember, though he knew it had been full of glowing eyes and empty streets. Beside him, Oma was already awake, sitting on her mat and holding the black stone Mama Olekan had given her. Did you sleep? Kwame asked. She shook her head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that restaurant again. I saw Mama Abeni reaching for me. I saw myself eating and never being able to stop. Kwame sat up and put his arm around his sister's shoulders. But that didn't happen. We escaped. We won. And we are going to make sure nothing like that happens to anyone else. You really think we can do this? Ama asked, looking up at him with eyes that seemed too old for an 11-year-old. You really think 3 kids can stop something that's making dozens of people disappear? I don't know, Kwame admitted. But we have to try. We're the only ones who know the truth. We're the only ones who can see what's really happening. They got dressed and went to the kitchen for breakfast. Mama Ikin had left early for another shift at the hospital, but she prepared akara and pap for them and left a note reminding them to do their homework and stay out of trouble. If only she knew, Kwame thought, what kind of trouble they were actually getting into. Around noon, Zainab arrived at their house as they'd planned. They told the neighbor who was supposed to be watching them that they were going to the market, then set off toward Victoria Island, where Kwame Adeyemi had disappeared. The journey took over an hour by public transport. Victoria Island was one of the wealthy parts of Lagos, full of big houses and fancy cars and people who looked like they'd never had to worry about where their next meal would come from. It felt like a different world from Soralia. They found Chief Adeyemi's house easily enough. It was impossible to miss, a massive compound with high walls and a gate guarded by 2 security men in uniform. There was no way they could just walk in and start asking questions. Now what? Ama asked, staring at the imposing gate. Zainab. Pull them around the corner, out of sight of the guards. My grandmother taught me that sometimes the best information comes from the helpers, not the masters. Look. She pointed down the street to where several women in house help uniforms were gathered near a small provision shop, chatting and laughing during what looked like their break time. We talked to them, Zainab said. Servants see everything, but I rarely asked what they know. They approached the group casually, and Zainab bought some groundnuts from the shop as an excuse to linger nearby. One of the women, middle-aged with kind eyes, noticed them and smiled. You children are far from home, she said in Yoruba. What brings you to this area? We heard about the girl who disappeared, Kwame said carefully. Kwame Adeyemi. We go to school not far from here, and everyone is talking about it. It's very scary. The woman's face grew sad. Oh, yes. Poor Kwame. Such a sweet girl. I work 3 houses down from the Adeyemi compound. We are all frightened. Nobody knows what is happening. Were you here when she disappeared? Oma asked innocently. The woman nodded. I saw her come home from school that afternoon. She waved to me as the driver brought her through the gate. She seemed happy, normal. Then, maybe 1 hour later, there was screaming. Her mother came running out, crying that Kwame was gone. Just gone, like she had vanished into thin air. Did anyone see anything strange? Zainab pressed gently. Any strange people around? Any unusual sounds or smells? The woman hesitated, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. There was something, she said slowly. But it sounds crazy, so I didn't tell the police. What was it? Kwame asked, his heart beginning to race. About 20 minutes before the screaming started, I was taking clothes off the line in our compound yard. I heard singing. Beautiful singing, like nothing I'd ever heard before. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It made me feel strange, like I wanted to walk toward it, like I couldn't help myself. But then my madam called me inside, and the feeling broke. When I came back out a few minutes later, the singing had stopped. Kwame felt the leather pouch at his waist grow warm. He exchanged glances with Zainab and Oma. What kind of singing was it? Did you recognize the language? That's the strange part, the woman said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It wasn't in any language I know. Not Yoruba, not Igbo, not Hausa, not English. It was something older, something that made my skin crawl even though it was beautiful. My grandmother used to tell stories about spirit songs that could lure people away. I thought they were just stories to scare children. But now. She trailed off, shaking her head. Thank you, Kwame said sincerely. You've been very helpful. As they walked away from the shop, Ama clutched her stone. It's warm, she whispered. The stone is getting warm. Mine too, Kwame said, touching the leather pouch. Zainab looked around nervously. That means spirits are near. We should be careful. They continued down the street, trying to look casual but staying alert. Kwame noticed something odd about one of the houses they passed. While all the other compounds looked lived in and well maintained, this one seemed somehow wrong. The gate was clean and freshly painted, but no sounds came from inside. No voices, no music, no signs of life at all. And the air near it felt cold, despite the hot Lagos afternoon. Do you feel that? Ama asked, stopping in front of the gate. Yes, Zainab said. Something is very wrong with this place. The stone in Ama's hand was now almost too hot to hold. Kwame's patch felt like it was burning against his side. Whatever was in that compound, it was definitely spiritual. Before they could investigate further, the gate suddenly swung open. A man stood there, tall and thin, wearing an expensive-looking suit despite the heat. His eyes were very dark, too dark, like looking into deep wells with no bottom. Children, he said, and his voice was smooth like oil. Why are you standing in front of my house? Are you lost? Every instinct in Kwame's body screamed at him to run. This man was not human, or at least not entirely human. The way he stood, the way he moved, the way his shadow seemed to stretch too far in the afternoon sun, everything about him was wrong. We're just walking, Kwame said, trying to keep his voice steady. We didn't mean to bother you. The man smiled, showing very white teeth. You look familiar, he said, staring at Kwame intently. Have we met before? No, not you. But someone like you. Someone who interfered with business that wasn't theirs to interfere with. Kwame's blood ran cold. Could this man somehow know about what happened at the restaurant? Was he connected to Mama Abeni? We should go, Zainab said quickly, tugging on Kwame's arm. Our parents are waiting for us. Yes, of course, the man said, but he didn't move from blocking the gateway. But first, perhaps you children would like to come inside. I have cold drinks. Snacks. It's so hot outside, and you've walked so far. No, thank you, Kwame said firmly, remembering Mama Olikan's lessons. Never accept food or drink from spirits. Never enter their homes unless you have protection. Never trust their hospitality. The man's smile grew wider, impossibly wide, just like Mama Abini's had. Are you sure? I have such interesting things inside. Things that would answer all your curious questions. Things about missing children and spirit songs and gates between worlds. Don't you want to know the truth? He knew. Somehow, this thing in a man's shape knew exactly what they were looking for and why they were here. Run, Zainab whispered urgently. Run now. They turned and ran, their feet pounding on the pavement. Behind them, Kwame could hear the man laughing, a sound that echoed strangely, like it was coming from multiple mouths at once. You can run, little investigators, the man's voice called after them, seeming to follow them even as they put distance between themselves and the compound. But Lagos is full of eyes now. Full of ears. Full of teeth. We know you're looking for us. And soon, very soon, we'll come looking for you. They didn't stop running until they reached a busy main road full of people and traffic and normal, everyday Lagos life. Only then did they pause, bent over and gasping for breath. What was that? Ama panted, her face pale with fear. A spirit, Zainab said grimly. A powerful one. And he knows we're investigating. This is worse than I thought. Much worse. Kwame's mind was racing. They had found something important, a location where spirits were definitely gathering, possibly even the place where the gates between worlds were being opened. But now those same spirits knew about them. They were in more danger than ever. "We need to tell Mama Olekan," he said. "Right now. This is too big for us to handle alone." They made their way back to Yoba as quickly as they could, constantly looking over their shoulders, jumping at every shadow and unexpected sound. The protective items Mama Olekan had given them stayed warm the entire journey, warning them that spiritual danger was all around. When they finally reached Mama Olekan's compound and knocked on her blue gate, it was Zainab's grandmother herself who answered, her milky eyes somehow seeing them clearly despite their cloudiness. "Come in quickly," she said, ushering them inside and closing the gate firmly behind them. "I felt a disturbance in the spiritual realm. Something has noticed you. Tell me everything." They sat in her room and recounted everything that had happened, the servant's story about the spirit song, the cold compound, and most importantly, the man who had confronted them. As they spoke, Mama Olekan's face grew more and more grave. "This is very serious," she said when they finished. "The being you encountered is called an Emery, a high-ranking spirit servant. They don't usually cross into our world unless summoned by someone with great power and knowledge. If an Emery is openly operating in Victoria Island, it means whoever is behind all this is very close to completing their plan." "What do we do?" Kwame asked. "That thing knows we're investigating. It threatened us." Mama Olekan stood and began pacing, her white robe swishing around her. "We need to act quickly. The fact that the Emery revealed itself means they're confident, which means they must be nearly ready to open the final gate and bring through the Obiku Lord. We have perhaps days, maybe only hours." She pulled out the map of Lagos again and stared at it for a long moment. "You said the compound was on Victoria Island, near the Adeyemi house. Show me exactly where." Zainab pointed to the spot on the map. Mama Olekan drew an X there, and suddenly the pattern became clearer. All the disappearances, all the X marks, formed a circle around Lagos Island and Victoria Island. And at the center of that circle, right where the compound with the Emery was located, sat a perfect blank space. "There," Mama Olekan said, tapping the center of the circle. "That's where the final ritual will take place. That's where we need to go to stop this." "We?" Kwame asked. "You're coming with us." "I must," Mama Olekan said. "This has gone beyond what children alone can handle, no matter how gifted you are. We need to go there tonight, under the cover of darkness, and we need to disrupt whatever ritual is being prepared. It's the only way to save the missing people and prevent the Obiku Lord from crossing over." "But there are spirits there," Oma said, her voice small and frightened. "Strong ones. How can we fight them?" Mama Olekan smiled grimly. "We don't fight them directly. That would be suicide. Instead, we'll use the old ways, the rules and restrictions that bind all spirits. We'll turn their own power against them. But I won't lie to you, children. This will be dangerous. The most dangerous thing any of you have ever done. If you want to back out, I'll understand." Kwame looked at Oma, and she looked back at him. He could see the fear in her eyes, but he could also see determination. They had already escaped one spirit. They had already seen too much to turn back now. "We're in," Kwame said. "We'll help you stop this." "Good," Mama Olekan said. "Then we have much to prepare and very little time. Zainab, gather the items from the red chest in the back room. Kwame, Oma, you must go home and act normal. Tell your mother you're sleeping at Zainab's house tonight for a school project. Pack clothes so it looks real. Then come back here as soon as it gets dark. We'll leave at midnight, when the barrier between worlds is thinnest but before the ritual can be completed." They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Mama Olekan taught them protection prayers and showed them how to draw symbols in the air that would create temporary shields against spiritual attacks. Zainab gathered strange items from around the house, bundles of herbs, small bottles of liquid that smelled sharp and medicinal, chalk for drawing protective circles, and a small drum that Mama Olikan said contained the heartbeat of the earth itself. As the sun began to set, painting the Lego sky in shades of orange and purple, Kwame and Ama headed home. They found Mama Ikin in the kitchen, exhausted from another long day at the hospital. "Mama," Kwame said, using his most innocent voice, "we have a big school project due this week. Zainab invited us to stay at her house tonight so we can work on it together. Is that okay?" Mama Ikin looked at them tiredly. She was too worn out to ask many questions. "Zainab is the girl from Yoba. The one whose grandmother you've been studying with." "Yes, Mama," Oma said. "She's very smart and helpful." "All right," Mama Ikin sighed. "But I want you to call me when you get there and before you go to bed. And come straight home in the morning." They packed their school bags with a change of clothes to make it look real, then hugged Mama Ikin goodbye. Kwame felt a pound of guilt as they left. What if something went wrong tonight? What if they didn't come back? Would Mama Ikin ever forgive them for lying to her? But there was no other choice. If they told her the truth, she would never believe them, and she certainly wouldn't let them go face down spirits in the middle of the night. They returned to Mama Olekan's compound as darkness fell over Lagos. The city transformed at night, becoming louder in some ways and quieter in others. Music blared from bars and clubs. Generators hummed, providing electricity where the power company had failed. But underneath all that normal noise, Kwame could now sense something else, a spiritual humming, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Mama Olekan had changed into different clothes, still all white but now including pants and a wrapped head tie that made her look like she was going into battle. Zainab wore similar clothes, and she handed white shirts and pants to Kwame and Ama. "White repels minor spirits," she explained. "It won't protect us from the powerful ones, but every little bit helps." They changed quickly, and then Mama Olekan gathered them in her room for final instructions. She drew symbols on their foreheads with a white chalk that felt cool and tingly against their skin. "These marks will help hide you from spiritual sight," she said. "Not completely, but enough that minor spirits might overlook you. When we get to the compound, stay close to me. Don't speak unless necessary. Don't touch anything you don't have to. And most importantly, if I tell you to run, you run. Don't argue, don't hesitate, just run. Understood?" They all nodded solemnly. "Good," Mama Olekan said. "Then let's go save our city." They left the compound at exactly midnight. The streets were quieter now, though Lagos never truly slept. They took a taxi to Victoria Island, with Mama Olekan telling the driver they were going to pray at an all-night church vigil, which explained their white clothes and serious faces. The driver dropped them off several streets away from the target compound. They walked the rest of the way in silence, keeping to the shadows. The protective items they carried grew warmer with each step, warning them they were approaching a place of great spiritual power. When they reached the street where the compound stood, Kwame saw that it looked even stranger at night than it had during the day. No lights showed in any windows. No sounds came from inside. But the air around it shimmered slightly, like heat rising from hot pavement, except the night was cool. "The veil between words is thin here," Mama Olekan whispered. "Very thin. They've been working on this for months, weakening the barrier bit by bit. We must be extremely careful." She pulled out the small drum she'd brought and began to beat it softly, a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat. "This will create a protective field around us. Stay within earshot of the drum, and you'll be safer." They approached the compound's gate. It was locked, but Mama Olekan pulled out a small bottle and sprinkled some liquid on the lock. It clicked open with a sound like a sigh. "Old magic," she whispered. "Older than any lock." They slipped inside the compound, and immediately Kwame felt like he'd stepped into another world. The compound looked normal from outside, but inside, everything was wrong. The grass was gray instead of green. The trees had no leaves, just bare branches that twisted in patterns that hurt to look at. And in the center of the compound stood the house, but it wasn't really a house anymore. It was more like a doorway, a passage, with the building's structure forming a frame around something vast and dark and terrible that waited on the other side. "Oh no," Mama Olikan breathed. "We are too late. They've already started the ritual." From somewhere inside the house that wasn't quite a house, Kwame heard chanting. Multiple voices speaking in that same ancient language the spirit song had used. And underneath the chanting, he heard something else, crying. The crying of many people, frightened and hopeless. "The missing people," Oma whispered. "They're in there." "Yes," Mama Olikan said grimly. "Their life force is being used to power the final gate. If we don't stop this ritual in the next few minutes, they'll all die, and the Abiku Lord will cross over completely." "What do we do?" Zainab asked. Mama Olikan pulled out a piece of chalk and began drawing symbols on the ground, walking quickly. "We create a counter-ritual. A disruption. Spiritual magic is like music. If you introduce the right discordant note, the whole song falls apart. But someone needs to get inside that house and break the focus of the ritual. Someone small enough to slip in unnoticed, brave enough to face what's inside." She looked at Kwame and Ama. "No," Kwame said immediately. "There has to be another way. We can't send children in there alone." "I know," Mama Olikan said sadly. "But adults can't enter. The ritual specifically blocks anyone over a certain age from crossing the threshold. That's why they've been taking children and young people. Their life force is more pure, more potent, and the magical barriers don't affect them as strongly. It has to be you three." Kwame's hands were shaking. He wanted to refuse, wanted to say this was too much, too dangerous, too impossible. But then he heard the crying from inside the house again, and he thought about all those people trapped there, being slowly drained of everything that made them alive. "What do we need to do?" he asked quietly. Mama Olikan finished drawing her symbols and stood up. "Inside that house, at the center of the ritual, there will be an anchor, an object or symbol that focuses all the spiritual energy. You need to find it and destroy it. Once the anchor is broken, the ritual will collapse, the gate will close, and the trapped people can be freed." "What will the anchor look like?" Zainab asked. "I don't know," Mama Olikan admitted. "It could be anything. A statue, a bowl, a mirror, a person. But you'll know it when you see it. It will be the thing that feels most wrong, most powerful, most central to everything around it. Trust your instincts. Trust your gift." She placed her hands on each of their heads in turn, speaking blessings in Yoruba, calling on old gods and ancient protections. Then she handed them each a small bag. Inside each bag is a mixture of earth, salt, and sacred herbs. When you find the anchor, pour this mixture on it or around it and speak these words: "By earth that grounds, by salt that purifies, by herbs that heal, I break this binding, I shatter this door, I return what was stolen." Can you remember that? They repeated the words several times until Mama Olikan was satisfied they had memorized them. "One more thing," she said, her voice heavy with warning. "The person conducting the ritual, the one who has been opening all these gates, you will face them inside. They will try to stop you. They will offer you deals, threaten you, maybe even hurt you. Remember everything I've taught you. Use your gift. Be clever, be brave, and most of all, stay together. Alone, you're just children. Together, you're something more." She hugged each of them tightly, and for a moment, Kwame felt like he was being hugged by his own grandmother, by every grandmother who had ever protected and loved a child. Then Mama Olikan stepped back and began drumming again, this time louder, faster, creating a rhythm that made Kwame's heart beat in sync with it. The symbols she'd drawn on the ground began to glow with a faint blue light. "Go now," she said, "while my magic provides cover. And may all the ancestors watch over you." Kwame, Ama, and Zainab joined hands and walked toward the house. With each step, the air grew colder. The crying grew louder. And the sense of wrongness became so intense that Kwame wanted to turn around and run far, far away. But he kept walking. They all kept walking. They reached the front door, which hung open like a mouth waiting to swallow them. Beyond it, Kwame could see darkness deeper than any natural darkness, and shapes moving within that darkness, shapes that didn't quite make sense to his eyes. Together, he whispered to Omar and Zainab. Together, they whispered back. And then, still holding hands, they stepped through the doorway and into a nightmare made real.